few weeks ago, I was looking for a used laptop. My old one was slow, and I needed a new one for work. I didn't have much money, so I decided to check Craigslist. After a bit of searching, I found a laptop that seemed perfect. It was at a good price and looked almost new in the pictures. I contacted the seller and arranged to meet in a public place to check it out. We decided to meet at a coffee shop in the afternoon. It seemed like a safe place with lots of people around. When I arrived, I saw the seller standing outside. He was a tall man dressed casually in jeans and a black jacket. He smiled and waved when he saw me. "Are you here for the laptop?" he asked. "Yes, I am," I replied. "Great," he said. "It's in my car." I parked just over there. He pointed to a car parked at the far end of the lot. I felt a bit uneasy about going to his car, but he seemed friendly enough. I followed him, keeping some distance. As we reached his car, he unlocked it and took out the laptop. It looked just like the pictures, maybe even better. "Do you want to check it out?" he asked. "It's a bit dark out here. We can sit in my car where the light is better." I hesitated for a moment. Sitting in a stranger's car didn't seem like a good idea, but I wanted to check the laptop thoroughly. I glanced around. There were still a few people in the parking lot. It seemed safe enough. "Okay. Just for a minute," I said. I got into the passenger seat, and he sat in the driver's seat. He handed me the laptop, and I started to inspect it. The screen was clear, the keyboard was clean, and everything seemed fine. I was about to turn it on when I heard the click of the car doors locking. My heart skipped a beat. "What's going on?" I asked, trying to stay calm. He smiled, but it wasn't a friendly smile anymore. It was cold and sinister. "I need your help with something," he said. "You see, I make deals like this all the time, but sometimes the buyers don't pay up. I need to make sure you understand how serious I am." I could feel panic rising in my chest. This was bad, very bad. I glanced at the door handle, but there was no way to unlock it from the inside. "Listen, I just wanted to buy a laptop," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "Oh, you'll get your laptop," he said. "But first, I need you to do something for me." He reached into his jacket and pulled out a small black device. It looked like a remote control. "See this?" he said, holding it up. "This is a tracker. I'm going to put it on you. If you try to go to the police or do anything stupid, I'll know exactly where you are." I was terrified. My mind was racing, trying to think of a way out. Then I remembered my phone in my pocket. If I could just send a quick message to someone, maybe I could get help. "Okay," I said, trying to sound cooperative. "I'll do what you want. Just tell me what to do." He seemed satisfied with my response and started explaining his plan. While he was talking, I slowly reached for my phone. I managed to unlock it and send a quick text to my friend, "Help, in danger, call the police." I hoped it would be enough. I needed to buy more time. "Can I at least see if the laptop works?" I asked. "I need to make sure it's not broken." He looked at me for a moment, then nodded. "Fine, but no tricks." I turned on the laptop and pretended to check it, but my mind was focused on escaping. I needed a distraction. Then an idea came to me. "Hey, there's something wrong with the screen," I said, pointing to a random spot. "It looks like a crack." He leaned in to look, and at that moment, I swung the laptop at his head with all my strength. The impact stunned him, and I took the chance to unlock the door and bolt out of the car. I ran as fast as I could, shouting for help. A couple of people in the parking lot saw me and came running. I explained what happened, and they called the police. The police arrived quickly. They found the man still in his car, holding his head where I had hit him. They arrested him and took him away. Later at the police station, I gave my statement. The officers told me that the man had been involved in similar crimes before. He lured people with fake deals and then trapped them in his car. I was shaken but relieved that I had managed to escape. The police praised me for my quick thinking and told me that my text message had helped them respond quickly. I learned a valuable lesson that day. No deal is worth risking your safety. From now on, I'll be much more careful with online transactions. As I left the police station, I couldn't help but feel grateful. Things could have ended much worse, but I was safe, and that was all that mattered. I was looking for a bike on Craigslist. I needed one for my daily commute to work. My old bike was worn out, and I wanted something reliable. One evening, I found a listing that caught my eye. It was for a new-looking bike at a very low price. The pictures showed a shiny, almost unused bike. It seemed too good to be true, but I couldn't resist checking it out. I contacted the seller through Craigslist. He responded quickly and gave me an address where we could meet. The address was for an old industrial area in town. It seemed a bit strange, but I thought maybe he worked in one of the factories there. We agreed to meet the next evening. The following day, I finished work and drove to the address. The area was deserted. The factories looked abandoned, with broken windows and rusted metal everywhere. I felt uneasy but decided to go ahead anyway. I parked my car and walked to the address the seller had given me. It was an old rundown factory with a large metal door. There were no lights around, and the sun was starting to set, casting long shadows that made everything look even more eerie. I checked my phone for messages from the seller. He had texted me that he was inside the factory and to come in. Hesitating for a moment, I took a deep breath and pushed the heavy door open. It creaked loudly, echoing through the empty building. Inside, it was dark and musty. The air was thick with the smell of dust and rust. I could barely see anything, so I used the flashlight on my phone to light the way. "Hello," I called out, my voice sounding small in the vast space. No response. I took a few steps further inside, my footsteps echoing on the concrete floor. Just as I was about to turn back, I saw a figure emerge from the shadows. It was a man, probably in his mid-30s, wearing a hoodie and jeans. He had the bike with him. "Hi, I'm here about the bike," I said, trying to sound confident despite my growing fear. "Yeah, it's right here," he replied, his voice rough. "Come closer and check it out." I walked over and looked at the bike. It was just like the pictures, shiny and new. I couldn't believe my luck. I reached into my pocket to get the money when suddenly I felt a sharp pain in my side. The man had pulled a knife on me. "Give me your wallet and phone," he demanded, his eyes cold and hard. I froze for a moment, but then handed over my wallet and phone, my hands shaking. He took them and pushed me to the ground. I hit the floor hard, the breath knocked out of me. "Don't move," he warned before he disappeared into the shadows with my belongings. I lay there for a few minutes, trying to catch my breath and gather my thoughts. My side hurt where he hit me, but I was more shocked than anything. I couldn't believe what had just happened. Slowly, I got up and stumbled out of the factory. The sky was dark now, and the street lights cast an eerie glow on the deserted streets. I made my way back to my car, my mind racing. I had to call the police, but my phone was gone. I remembered seeing a pay phone near the entrance to the industrial area, so I headed in that direction. When I reached the pay phone, I fumbled with the change in my pocket and dialed 911. The operator answered, and I quickly explained what had happened. She told me to stay where I was and that officers were on their way. I hung up and waited, my heart still pounding. After what felt like an eternity, I saw the flashing lights of a police car approaching. 2 officers got out and approached me. I told them everything, from finding the listing on Craigslist to meeting the man in the factory. They listened carefully and then asked me to show them where it happened. We walked back to the factory, and I pointed out the spot where the man had robbed me. The officers searched the area and found some of my belongings scattered on the floor. They also found the bike hidden behind some old machinery. One of the officers stayed with me while the other radioed for backup. Within minutes, more police cars arrived and they began to search the entire building. After a while, they found the man hiding in one of the back rooms. He still had my wallet and phone on him. They arrested him and brought him out in handcuffs. I felt a wave of relief wash over me, knowing that he wouldn't be able to hurt anyone else. The officers took my statement and returned my belongings. They told me they would keep the bike as evidence for the investigation. I thanked them and finally headed home, exhausted and shaken, but grateful to be safe. The experience left me wary of online deals and meeting strangers. I learned a hard lesson that day about being cautious and trusting my instincts. From then on, I made sure to meet sellers in public places during the day and never go alone. It was July 2020. The summer heat was intense, and the days were long. Max, my small brown terrier with a white spot on his chest, went missing. He was my best friend, and I was heartbroken when he disappeared. I searched everywhere in the neighborhood, local parks, and even nearby towns. I put up posters and asked everyone if they had seen him. Days turned into weeks, and there was still no sign of Max. One evening, feeling hopeless and desperate, I decided to check Craigslist. Maybe someone had found him and posted an ad. I typed in "found dog" and scrolled through the listings. My heart skipped a beat when I saw a new ad found small brown dog with white chest spot. The description matched Max perfectly. I quickly sent a message to the person who posted the ad. I introduced myself and described Max in detail, hoping they still had him. A reply came almost immediately. "Yes, I have your dog. Meet me tomorrow at 6 p.m. at Pinewood Trail. I will bring him there." Pinewood Trail was a remote area on the outskirts of town, known for its dense woods and quiet paths. It was about a 30-minute drive from my house. I was so eager to see Max again that I didn't think twice about the odd meeting place. The next day, I got into my car and drove to Pinewood Trail. The sun was beginning to set, casting long shadows across the road. The trailhead was empty, and the parking lot was deserted. I parked my car and looked around, hoping to see someone with Max. As I waited, the sky grew darker, and the silence of the woods became more pronounced. I checked my phone. It was 6:15 p.m., and there was still no sign of the person or Max. I started to feel uneasy. After a few more minutes, a man appeared from the trail. He was tall with a scruffy beard and wearing a dark hoodie. He walked towards me with a slow, deliberate pace. My heart pounded with a mix of hope and fear. "Are you here for the dog?" he asked, his voice low and rough. "Yes." "Do you have him?" I replied, trying to keep my voice steady. "He's just a little further down the trail." "Follow me," he said, turning back towards the woods. Something didn't feel right. Why would he bring Max so deep into the woods? I hesitated but started to follow him. As we walked, the trees grew thicker, and the light from the setting sun barely penetrated the canopy. After a few minutes, the man stopped and turned to face me. "He's just a bit further," "Come on," he urged, but there was something unsettling in his eyes. I glanced around, realizing how isolated I was. The trail was narrow and the woods were dense and dark. A chill ran down my spine. Suddenly, I remembered a news article I had read a few months ago about a serial attacker who lured people into remote areas using fake ads. My heart raced as the pieces fell into place. I needed to get out of there. I forced a smile and said, "I just need to grab something from my car. I'll be right back." The man's expression changed. He seemed impatient, almost irritated. "Hurry up," he muttered. I turned and walked back down the trail, trying to keep my pace steady and calm. As soon as I was out of sight, I broke into a run. My breath came in short, panicked gasps as I sprinted towards my car. I could hear footsteps behind me, quickening with each step I took. Reaching the parking lot, I fumbled with my keys, my hands shaking. I managed to unlock the door and jumped in, slamming it shut and locking it. The man emerged from the trail, his face twisted with anger. He pounded on my window, shouting for me to get out. I started the car and sped out of the parking lot, my heart pounding. I didn't stop until I was back in town, surrounded by people and street lights. Safe at last, I pulled over and called the police, reporting everything that had happened. Later that night, an officer called me back. The man was a known serial attacker who had been using fake ads to lure people into remote areas. I was lucky to have escaped unharmed. I never saw Max again, but I like to think that he found a kind person who took him in. The experience left me shaken, and I became much more cautious. I missed Max dearly, but I was grateful to be safe. From that day on, I warned others about the dangers of meeting strangers in remote areas. The memory of that evening stayed with me, a constant reminder to trust my instincts and stay vigilant. Max may have been lost, but I found a new sense of awareness that kept me safe in the days to come. When I put my dining room set up for sale on Craigslist, I never expected it would lead to a life-threatening encounter with a man hiding in my pantry, armed and ready to strike. I was selling a dining room set on Craigslist for $1,200 and included slightly negotiable in the title. It was a good-looking set, but I wasn't getting any offers, likely because I lived in a rural area. Eventually, I received a call from a man who sounded a bit off but wanted to check out the set. I gave him my address, and he said he'd be over within the hour. I dusted the furniture one more time to make it look as nice as possible. The doorbell rang within 10 minutes, surprising me because he must have lived nearby, which was unusual in my area. I opened the door and immediately felt uncomfortable about letting this man into my house. He wore a stained undershirt, baggy pants with tears, and had a gray mustache stained brown in the middle. His hair was a complete mess. Despite my discomfort, I invited him in. He immediately focused on the dining room set, walking around slowly, making weird sounds, and touching every inch of the furniture. To break the silence, I reminded him that the asking price was $1,200. He stopped, looked at me with an unnerving smile, and offered $500. I laughed at the insane offer, thinking he was joking, but his smile turned angry. I apologized and said $1,000 was the lowest I could go. He started acting even stranger, putting his hands to his head, making strange noises and pacing. He then looked at me with anger and hatred. Realizing this man wasn't right in the head, I needed him out of my house. I thanked him for coming, hinting it was time for him to leave, but he didn't move. His stare was full of malice. Fearing for my safety, I ran upstairs to my bedroom, grabbed my .45, and hid behind the wall, peeking into the dining room. The man was gone. I locked my bedroom door and called the police. While hiding, I heard sirens. I stayed put until the police arrived. I came out with my hands raised and showed them my ID. They asked me to wait outside while they searched the house. After about 5 minutes, the police emerged with the man in handcuffs. They told me he was hiding in my pantry closet with a loaded gun. It felt like a miracle that the police weren't shot. What still haunts me is the look of malice and hatred he gave me from the police car as it drove off. I can't shake the fear that he'll come back for me once he gets out of jail. I'm seriously considering moving to escape the constant paranoia. Selling a dining room set on Craigslist seemed harmless until I found myself face to face with a dangerous man who left me fearing for my life and questioning my safety at home. I was selling a dining room set on Craigslist for $1,200 and included slightly negotiable in the title. It was a good-looking set, but I wasn't getting any offers, likely because I lived in a rural area. Eventually, I received a call from a man who sounded a bit off but wanted to check out the set. I gave him my address, and he said he'd be over within the hour. I dusted the furniture one more time to make it look as nice as possible. The doorbell rang within 10 minutes, surprising me because he must have lived nearby, which was unusual in my area. I opened the door and immediately felt uncomfortable about letting this man into my house. He wore a stained undershirt, baggy pants with tears, and had a gray mustache stained brown in the middle. His hair was a complete mess. Despite my discomfort, I invited him in. He immediately focused on the dining room set, walking around slowly, making weird sounds, and touching every inch of the furniture. To break the silence, I reminded him that the asking price was $1,200. He stopped, looked at me with an unnerving smile, and offered $500. I laughed at the insane offer, thinking he was joking, but his smile turned angry. I apologized and said $1,000 was the lowest I could go. He started acting even stranger, putting his hands to his head, making strange noises and pacing. He then looked at me with anger and hatred. Realizing this man wasn't right in the head, I needed him out of my house. I thanked him for coming, hinting it was time for him to leave, but he didn't move. His stare was full of malice. Fearing for my safety, I ran upstairs to my bedroom, grabbed my .45, and hid behind the wall, peeking into the dining room. The man was gone. I locked my bedroom door and called the police. While hiding, I heard sirens. I stayed put until the police arrived. I came out with my hands raised and showed them my ID. They asked me to wait outside while they searched the house. After about 5 minutes, the police emerged with the man in handcuffs. They told me he was hiding in my pantry closet with a loaded gun. It felt like a miracle that the police weren't shot. What still haunts me is the look of malice and hatred he gave me from the police car as it drove off. I can't shake the fear that he'll come back for me once he gets out of jail. I'm seriously considering moving to escape the constant paranoia. Imagine searching for your first apartment on Craigslist and finding yourself in an abandoned house with a menacing stranger leading you to a basement filled with horrors. This happened to Amanda. This is a popular story with my family and most of my friends. Amanda, my brother's girlfriend, was looking for her first apartment and decided to find a roommate online. She found an ad on Craigslist titled "Roommate Wanted Females Only." The listing was for a room in a house for $225 a month, which was cheap for the area. The occupant described herself as a 23-year-old college student uncomfortable living with males. Amanda liked the place, but there was only one photo of the house's exterior. She emailed the occupant and quickly got a reply with details and a time to visit. When Amanda arrived, there was a handwritten note on the front door saying, "Door broken, use back door. The house looked nice but slightly unkempt." She knocked on the back door, and an older man answered, claiming to be the landlord. He said the occupant was out and had asked him to show her around. Amanda felt uneasy as the man, who appeared to be in his 40s and unkempt, showed her the house. Only the kitchen light was on, and there was no furniture. The landlord was irritable, rushing her through the rooms and only letting her look briefly. He refused to open one room, saying it was the occupant's and he didn't want to invade her privacy. Amanda noticed the front door had a plank nailed across it. Feeling increasingly uneasy, Amanda thanked the man and tried to leave. He then insisted on showing her the basement, claiming it was recently furnished. They were in a small hallway near the basement door, which opened outward, creating a barrier. The basement was pitch black, and he motioned for her to go down first. At that moment, Amanda received a text. Thinking quickly, she pretended it was a call from someone outside the house. She excused herself and walked out the back door, sprinting to her car and speeding away. At home, she told her family everything, and they called the police. The Craigslist post had been removed, and the house had been abandoned for over 6 months. In the room the landlord didn't open, police found a pile of dirty blankets, rotten food, and empty jugs. The walls were covered with ripped-up pages from porn magazines. In the basement, they found a thin piece of fishing twine at shin level across the stairs, a broom handle wrapped in leather belts, and a small box with rolls of assorted teeth. "Okay, I've got a story for you," I began, excitement lacing my voice. "I'll never forget the time I went on Craigslist to find a vintage rocking chair. I've always been into antique furniture, and when I saw this amazing mahogany chair with these insane carvings, I just knew I had to have it. So I messaged the seller, and we agreed to meet up at their place the next day. I was pretty pumped about it," I continued, recalling the eagerness I felt. "Anyway, the next day I grabbed the cash and drove to the seller's house. The address led me to this sketchy-looking neighborhood, which was a bit unsettling, but I told myself not to judge a book by its cover. When I arrived, the house was old and looked like it hadn't been taken care of in years. I started having second thoughts, but my desire for that rocking chair pushed me to go on," I explained, a sense of unease creeping in. So I walked up to the front door and knocked. The door slowly creaked open, and there was this shadowy figure just standing there, motioning for me to come in. I hesitated for a sec, but then went inside, trying to convince myself that I was overreacting. I recounted, the memory sending shivers down my spine. The inside of the house was even creepier. It was dark and smelled like mildew, and there were all these old, dusty pieces of furniture and cobwebs everywhere. The seller led me through this labyrinth of rooms, and the further we went, the more I started to freak out. But I just kept telling myself that it was all in my head. I continued, my heart racing with each step. We finally got to this room in the back of the house, and there it was, the rocking chair I'd seen in the ad. It looked just as amazing as it did in the photos, and for a moment, I felt relieved. I went up to inspect the chair, excited to take it home. I handed the seller the cash, and they said they'd help me carry it to my car, I said, recalling the tense atmosphere. As we were heading back to the house, I noticed that a door we passed earlier that had been locked was now slightly open. I could hear these faint, desperate cries coming from inside, and I felt chills running down my spine. I glanced at the seller, who seemed to be getting more and more nervous, and my heart started pounding like crazy, I confessed, the memory still vivid in my mind. I knew I had to get out of there, so I pretended that I got an emergency phone call and told the seller I had to leave right away, but to come back for the chair later. The seller hesitated, then finally agreed. I practically sprinted out of the house, my heart pounding so hard I could hardly breathe, I recalled, the panic still fresh. Once I was safe in my car, I sped off to the nearest police station. I told them everything that had happened, my hands shaking the whole time. The police acted quickly and launched an investigation. It turned out that the seller had kidnapped someone and was holding them captive in that room, I revealed, the shock still evident in my voice. I couldn't believe how close I'd come to a truly terrifying situation. The police were able to save the person being held captive, and the seller was arrested. They had a long criminal record, including theft and assault. I can't even imagine what might have happened if I hadn't trusted my instincts and gotten out of there when I did, I admitted, a shiver running down my spine at the thought. My friends and family were shocked when they heard my story. They couldn't believe something like this could happen to someone they knew. I became a lot more cautious after that, always making sure to trust my gut and put safety first. As for the rocking chair, well, I never went back for it, I concluded, the memory still haunting me. The thought of going back to that house, even with the police involved, was too much for me to handle. Eventually, I found another antique chair from a reliable seller. But the memory of that night still lingers with me. Now, whenever I browse Craigslist or other online marketplaces, that eerie encounter is always at the back of my mind. I still can't help but shudder to think about the children's cries behind that door and the dark, musty house, I admitted, the horror of the situation still raw. As for the rocking chair, it has become a symbol of that fateful night. Even now, sometimes in the dead of night, I can't help but wonder what other sinister secrets that house and its twisted occupant might have been hiding. Roughly 2 years ago, I decided to sell my old phone on Craigslist after upgrading to a new one. The phone was only 2 years old and in good condition, so I thought it would attract buyers. After considering eBay, Facebook Marketplace, and Craigslist, I opted for the latter, prioritizing a quick sale over making a profit. Listing the phone at a reasonable price, I received a text message expressing interest within a few hours. The potential buyer, Molly, seemed eager, so we arranged to meet the following day outside a local strip mall, conveniently located for both of us. When we met, the transaction went smoothly, and Molly purchased the phone without any issues. Everything appeared normal during our brief interaction, and there were no red flags. However, things took a strange turn in the days that followed. Molly began texting me, initially asking me to come over and then inquiring if she could visit my place. It was unexpected and out of context, considering our interaction had been solely about the phone sale. At first I wondered if she had the wrong number, but then she mentioned my name, indicating she was indeed contacting me intentionally. I had no interest in pursuing any further interaction with Molly beyond the sale, and her persistent texts, which continued late into the night and into the next morning, left me feeling uncomfortable and confused. Once again, Molly persisted in her attempts to come over, ignoring my previous attempts to deter her. Feeling increasingly uncomfortable, I lied and told her I had a girlfriend, hoping she would take the hint and leave me alone. However, Molly disregarded my statement, insisting it didn't matter, and continued texting me as if we were close friends, asking about my activities. Feeling bewildered by her behavior, I asked her to stop, but she became angry and started hurling insults at me. Frustrated and alarmed, I decided to block her, hoping to put an end to the unsettling situation. Little did I know, the ordeal was far from over. Later that same night, I heard a knock at my front door. Peering through the window, I was stunned to see Molly standing outside. How did she find out where I lived? It was alarming to think she might have followed me home. Reluctantly, I answered the door, intending to firmly tell her to leave. However, as soon as I opened the door, Molly launched into a tirade of curses and refused to leave. Growing increasingly aggressive, she attempted to enter my house. In a panic, I slammed the door shut and locked it, but she persisted, banging on windows and trying to force her way inside. Realizing I needed help, I called the police and waited inside. Molly continued her relentless assault on my home, banging on windows and attempting to open doors. Even when I tried to reason with her through a window, she remained undeterred. Thankfully, the police arrived and were able to intervene, putting an end to Molly's alarming behavior. Subsequently, I obtained a restraining order against her, as I couldn't comprehend why she fixated on me so intensely. I suspected drugs might be involved, but I couldn't say for sure. This experience served as a stark reminder to exercise caution when using platforms like Craigslist or Facebook Marketplace. I have a Craigslist horror story that I'd like to share, serving as a cautionary tale for those using such websites. A few years ago, I was selling my old MacBook Pro laptop. It was still fairly new, and since I had received a new one from work, I decided to put it up for sale on Craigslist for $1,000. It was a reasonable price considering its condition and value. Within 24 hours of posting the ad, I received a text from someone expressing interest in buying the laptop. I confirmed the price of $1,000 and suggested meeting in a public place for safety reasons. The person proposed Walmart, which seemed like a reasonable choice due to its high visibility and foot traffic. However, what raised a red flag was the person's insistence on meeting at 10 p.m. or later, claiming they worked overnight shifts. Despite my reservations, I agreed to the meeting time. When I asked for their name, they identified themselves as Derek, providing only a vague description of being of average height with dark hair. Despite the uncertainty, we settled on meeting at 10:15 p.m. the following night at Walmart. Arriving shortly after 10 p.m., I parked in the middle of the parking lot, which by then was eerily quiet as the store was set to close at 11 p.m. I believe I texted Derek to let him know that I was at the agreed meeting spot. However, he didn't respond for a while, leaving me waiting and growing increasingly frustrated. It wasn't until around 10:30 p.m. that he finally replied, informing me that he would arrive in about 15 minutes. Despite my annoyance, I decided to wait patiently, hoping that selling the laptop would make it worth the wait. As time ticked by and it approached 11 p.m., I was on the verge of leaving when Derek finally texted me, claiming he had arrived and was at the back of the parking lot. Scanning the area, I couldn't spot him from where I was parked, eager to conclude the transaction. I drove towards the rear of the parking lot, where several cars were scattered randomly. Unsure which one belonged to Derek, I parked in a random spot and asked him again for his location. With no immediate response from Derek, I suddenly spotted a car approaching. Assuming it was him, I watched as it drew nearer, only to realize that the driver and passengers were all wearing black ski masks. Sensing danger, I swiftly drove away, prompting the car to follow me briefly. However, as we reached the front of the parking lot, I noticed a police car stationed there. Seizing the opportunity, I drove towards the police car, prompting the car behind me to make a hasty U-turn in the narrow parking island. Thankfully, the ploy worked, and the suspicious individuals disappeared. Relieved, I drove home and promptly blocked Derek's number. Subsequently, I removed my laptop from Craigslist and opted to list it on eBay instead. At 23, I was on the hunt for a studio apartment to rent. Fresh out of college, I had next to no money, barely scraping by on a bit more than minimum wage. My primary focus was finding the cheapest possible option available. Initially, I searched for both one-bedroom apartments and studios. However, as the weeks went by, it became increasingly clear that those options were simply not financially feasible. Reluctantly, I turned to Craigslist, despite its less than stellar reputation. One of my friends had a positive experience and recommended it, so I decided to give it a shot. On the first day of browsing Craigslist, I didn't come across anything suitable, though the sheer volume of listings gave me a glimmer of hope. Unfortunately, none of them matched my location or price requirements. It was around the third or fourth day of searching that I stumbled upon a new listing that caught my attention. Located a few miles away, it was for a studio in a small apartment building. Despite the low-quality, pixelated pictures, I decided to investigate further, intrigued by the promising details. I reached out to the owner, who responded promptly, and we arranged a tour for later that evening at 7. In our brief exchange, nothing struck me as out of the ordinary about the owner. His messages were professional, and he appeared eager to show me the place. A couple of hours later, I got into my car and started driving over to the address he sent me. It's worth noting that I was aware beforehand that this wasn't a particularly nice area of our city, but it was the most affordable. Honestly, I didn't think it was too bad, although looking back, perhaps I was just being naive because it seemed like my only option. Upon arriving, I pulled up to a rather old-looking apartment building. Parking on the side of the street, I texted the man to let him know I had arrived, then proceeded to walk up to the front door. Not spotting the man anywhere, I buzzed the room and waited for a few seconds before the door unlocked. Stepping inside, I was greeted by a staircase in the middle and 2 rooms on either side. Before I could even glance at the room numbers, a voice echoed from somewhere above the staircase, informing me that they were on the 3rd floor. Assuming the man was addressing me, I began ascending the stairs. However, I couldn't shake the growing sense of unease at his absence from the door, especially considering how professional he had been in our text exchanges. Upon reaching the top of the steps, I found myself in a small hallway with 2 doors, one of which was open. I walked over and peered inside, only to find a man standing a few feet away, looking back at me. He greeted me warmly, shook my hand, and invited me inside. Yet my confusion was immediate. The place was clearly inhabited, with a couch, TV, chairs, and even food on the counters. It was unmistakably lived in. "Does someone else live here?" I asked kindly. The man quickly replied with a short laugh and said, "No one lived here and everything would be gone by tomorrow." I smiled and said, "Okay, though that response didn't sit right with me." He started leading me further in, pointing out features of the place. But it suddenly dawned on me that this wasn't even a studio. There were multiple doors, surely leading to other rooms. This was at least a 1 or 2 bedroom apartment. And there was no way the price could be what he said it was. It seemed like he noticed my suspicions as he stopped what he was saying and moved toward the hallway. He opened one of the doors that clearly led to a bedroom and started telling me to take a look inside. But before I could answer, we were interrupted when my phone chimed. I pulled it out of my pocket and checked who it was. My face went pale, seeing it was from the man from Craigslist asking where I was. I looked up in horror, realizing what had happened, and I could tell that whoever this guy was in front of me knew that I'd figured it out. This terrifying moment passed, and the guy didn't move or say anything. He just stood and looked at me with a blank stare. After a moment, I hurried out of there and down the stairs, not hearing the guy follow. I got in my car and left, feeling horrified. I never even texted the actual man back, as I was no longer interested in staying anywhere near that place. And I didn't know if maybe he was in on it too, somehow. But whoever that guy was who lured me into his home was so close to being able to probably abduct me. I don't know. And I don't even want to know. But I never opened Craigslist again after that night. I just finished my studies and needed a small place to live while I looked for a job. I was working part-time at a little grocery store. But now that I was done with school, it was time to find something better. Renting an apartment by myself was too expensive, so I was on the lookout for a room to rent in someone's house. I knew it would be a bit uncomfortable at first living with strangers, but I didn't really have another option. My friend from school who used to share a room with me told me to try Craigslist. It seemed that other websites didn't list single rooms or were too complicated to use. Craigslist had a lot of choices, so I decided to stick with it. After several days, I was getting nowhere. Nobody answered my messages, and the few who did just said the room was already taken. Then, on a Saturday morning, I saw a new listing. It was close, affordable, and looked decent. A man named John was offering a large house with an available bedroom which also had its own bathroom and closet. It seemed perfect. So I sent him an email to show my interest and then went off to my job. Since the ad was fresh that morning, I was hopeful I was the first to reach out. During my lunch break, I checked my emails and saw that John had replied. He wanted me to come and see the place that same afternoon. I knew I'd be tired after work, but I really wanted this room, so I agreed, and we set a time. After my shift, I drove there, taking only about 10 minutes. The house looked good from the outside, just a normal house in a regular neighborhood. I parked my car nearby and walked up to the door to knock softly. After waiting a little, I knocked again, a bit louder. Just as I was about to text John, he opened the door to let me in. He was covered in sweat, as though he'd just been exercising, and he didn't smell nice at all. I didn't want to seem rude, so I didn't mention it. He started showing me around the first floor, pointing out the kitchen and living room. He said he hardly used these rooms, so I wouldn't be in his way, but looking around, it seemed like he used them a lot. The kitchen sink was overflowing with dirty dishes, and the couch was stained all over. The house was a lot messier than I expected, especially since the photos made it look so clean. One thing that really stood out to me was the couch in the living room. The picture showed a brown leather couch, but the one I saw was black. I guess John might have used old photos of the house from before. This felt a bit dishonest, but I was mainly interested in my room, which was upstairs. John led me to the stairs and then stopped, gesturing for me to go up first. I felt really uneasy as I climbed the stairs, especially since John stayed at the bottom just smiling and telling me my room was the first one on the left. When I reached the top and was about to go to my room, I heard a soft noise from behind the door. I looked back at John, and his smile was gone. "Is there someone else living here?" I asked. He sounded annoyed and said it was just a friend staying over and I shouldn't worry. He told me to go look at the room, insisting I would like it. By then, I was scared. Why didn't you mention his friend earlier, I thought. It felt like something I should have known. I wanted to leave immediately. I tried to sound confident as I told John the place wasn't right for me and started back down the stairs. He didn't seem happy and blocked the bottom of the stairs. I stopped a few steps away, insisting I had to leave. He tried once more to get me to see the room, but I refused. After a moment, he surprisingly stepped aside with a smile, letting me pass. I rushed out the door. Something was off about that house. I felt fortunate to get out so easily. I'd feared I might need to push my way out. Later, I checked Craigslist, and the ad was gone. I often think about what was in that room. Maybe it was empty, but I feel it was something far worse. When I was in college, I used to go camping with friends during the summer. One year, we decided to explore a new area we hadn't visited before. It was a dense forest quite far from the city. We were excited about the adventure and prepared all our gear, including tents, food, and a map of the area. After driving for several hours, we arrived and found a good spot to set up our camp. There were 5 of us: Mike, Sarah, Alex, John, and me. The first day went smoothly. We hiked a few trails, swam in a nearby lake, and enjoyed a campfire at night. However, things started getting strange on the second night. As we were sitting around the campfire, we heard rustling in the bushes. We assumed it was just a small animal and didn't pay much attention. But then, the noises got louder, and it felt like something or someone was watching us. Mike, being the bravest among us, grabbed a flashlight and walked towards the noise. We followed him, feeling a bit nervous. We didn't see anything unusual at first, but the feeling of being watched didn't go away. Eventually, we shrugged it off and went back to the campfire. Later that night, as we were getting ready to sleep, Sarah screamed. We all rushed to her tent, where she pointed out that her backpack was missing. We searched the entire campsite but couldn't find it. We thought maybe an animal had dragged it away. We tried to sleep, but the feeling of unease kept us awake. The next morning, we decided to pack up and leave a day early. We were all a bit spooked and didn't want to stay another night. As we were packing, we found Sarah's backpack hanging from a tree branch, about 20 feet off the ground. It was impossible for any of us to have put it there. We quickly packed the rest of our gear and left. To this day, none of us can explain what happened that night in the forest. We never went back to that area again. When I was a kid, my family moved into an old house in a small town. It was a beautiful large house with a lot of character, but it was also quite old. My parents were excited about the house, and my siblings and I quickly found our favorite spots. The house had a big backyard, perfect for playing, and a cozy attic filled with all sorts of interesting old things. One evening, about a month after we moved in, I was in my room playing with my toys when I heard a strange noise coming from the attic. It sounded like someone was walking around up there. I called out to my parents, but they were downstairs and didn't hear me. Curiosity got the better of me, so I decided to check it out myself. I grabbed a flashlight and made my way up the creaky stairs to the attic. When I reached the top, I shone the flashlight around, but didn't see anything unusual. Just as I was about to go back down, I heard the noise again, this time closer. I turned around quickly and saw a shadow move across the wall. My heart started racing, and I felt a chill run down my spine. I tried to tell myself it was just my imagination, but the noise continued. It sounded like soft footsteps coming towards me. I gathered all my courage and called out, "Who's there?" There was no answer, but the footsteps stopped. I slowly backed away towards the stairs, keeping the flashlight pointed ahead. Suddenly, I felt a cold breeze pass by me, and the flashlight flickered. I ran down the stairs as fast as I could and didn't stop until I reached my parents. I told them what had happened, but they assured me it was probably just the old house settling or the wind. I wanted to believe them, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something was in the attic. After that night, I avoided the attic as much as possible. Whenever I had to go up there, I made sure it was during the day and that someone else was with me. Even now, years later, I still get a little uneasy thinking about that old house and the strange noises in the attic. One summer, my friends and I decided to take a road trip across the country. We planned to visit various landmarks and camp out at different spots along the way. We were excited about the adventure and spent weeks preparing for the trip. We packed all the essentials, made a detailed itinerary, and set off early one morning. Our journey was going well, and we had a lot of fun visiting different places. One night, we found a secluded camping spot near a forest. It was perfect quiet, beautiful, and far from any busy roads. We set up our tents, built a campfire, and enjoyed a relaxing evening under the stars. As it got late, we decided to get some sleep. We were exhausted from the day's activities and fell asleep quickly. In the middle of the night, I woke up to a strange noise. It sounded like whispering, but I couldn't make out any words. I thought maybe one of my friends was talking in their sleep, so I tried to go back to sleep. But the whispering continued and seemed to be getting closer. I sat up and looked around the tent, but I couldn't see anything. I unzipped the tent slightly and peered outside. The campfire had died down and everything was dark. Suddenly, I heard the whispering right next to my ear. I jumped and looked around, but there was no one there. My heart was pounding. and I felt a cold sweat on my forehead. I quickly woke up my friends and told them what happened. They looked around but didn't find anything unusual. We decided to stay awake for the rest of the night, taking turns keeping watch. When morning came, we packed up and left the campsite as quickly as we could. We were all on edge and didn't want to stay another night there. As we drove away, we tried to rationalize what had happened, but none of us could come up with a good explanation. The experience left us shaken, and we made sure to choose more populated campsites for the rest of our trip.